I've been ordained to offer exclusively the traditional Latin Mass, and because of this Mass, we are here in Zimbabwe. The faithful asked in about 1979 for priests to come from Switzerland. Retreats were given in South Africa, in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban, and a priest also came here, Father Williamson at the time, and he established a mission here, which we have continued. Until recently we had priests living here in residence, but now because of the lesser numbers, because of many of our faithful have emigrated, we only come here occasionally. So on this property we have a retreat house, a church, and a priory, living quarters for the priests. The traditional Latin Mass is the holy sacrifice of the Mass as codified by Pope Pius V in 1570. In a bull, Quo Primum, he authorized this Mass to be said by any priest in perpetuity, but it was not making a new Mass, it was the Mass from the first centuries. We could look at the Gregorian Sacramentary from the 600s, the Leonine Sacramentary from the 400s, and before that it was unrecorded. So it's a Mass that's been in existence, you could say, for 2,000 years. Well, if you were to come to the Mass for your first time, the first thing that you would notice is the language. That it's Latin, which is a universal language, which helps to preserve the faith and shows the unity of the whole Church. Secondly, you would notice that the priest is facing the tabernacle and not the people. It's because it is more centered upon God and less upon man, where the faithful are offering the Mass not equally with the priest, but by an interior participation. You have people who receive communion kneeling down, more genuflections, signs of the cross, a greater reverence. So it is something that attracts the souls because it is something very mysterious, something supernatural with a great beauty and elegance, which doesn't have any fads to make it popular, but just it's something given to us by heaven. If they say it's the most beautiful thing on this side of heaven is the traditional Mass. Well, there would not be a concelebration. The priests offer the Mass individually. You might have a solemn high Mass where you have a priest, a deacon, and a subdeacon. But the individual Mass is important because of the value of each Mass. It's less democratic and more hierarchical. With the new Mass, there's more emphasis on the instructional part of the Mass, which is the Mass of the catechumens according to the old rite. So instead of 3 readings or lessons, there would be only 2, the epistle and the gospel. That the soul that is attracted to the traditional Mass is a prayerful soul, someone who prays the rosary, someone who knows their catechism. They don't want to go with a popular doctrine, they want the doctrine of all time. So a soul that wants to show respect towards God, not to get sort of an emotional high of a charismatic waving hands, anything like this. It's peaceful, quiet, and rich in doctrine. It's a parish because we provide all the sacraments. We give extreme unction to the sick, baptisms. It's a full parish life, but we avoid using the word parish because that is something which is juridical, authorized by the local bishop. We say that we are here without the bishop's permission because of a state of necessity in the Church, whereby because the traditional rites are not given and there are even so many abuses, doubtful sacraments, the faithful feel much safer going to the Mass that maybe they were raised with, and they want to be sure that they are getting good doctrine and good liturgy. Well, there's been varying regulations about the traditional Mass. Pope Benedict called it the extraordinary form, which we don't agree with. We think it's the ordinary, and that the new Mass is the extraordinary. That we are the norm, because we are the one that was here first and has been here for 2,000 years, a Mass which has been made almost like an experimental Mass for the last 50 years. The Holy Ghost works organically, like a plant. It doesn't make a sudden mutation. It grows based upon what it was before. It doesn't become something new. It embellishes, it makes more beautiful. So there have been additions over the years. Pope Gregory himself added 2 sentences to the canon which clarified what happens at the Mass. The old Mass has the idea of sacrifice as its essential. The new Mass has been influenced clearly with a Protestant theology because there were 6 Protestant theologians who helped to write the new Mass with Monsignor Bunini. And he wanted to remove all things which would be offensive to the Protestants from the Catholic Mass. And so in our refusing to say the new Mass, we don't say that it's heretical, but we do say that it's lacking. It's an ambiguity. It just emphasizes so much of a meal that you begin to forget that it's a sacrifice, the unbloody sacrifice of the cross. At the traditional Mass, the priest is very penitential. He feels himself unworthy to offer the Mass, and the faithful are asking for pardon through a propitiation, an atoning of the divine justice against their sins, as well as thanksgiving, adoration. But it's the Protestants who have eliminated this idea of reparation in the Mass. And I think that the Catholics, in order to try to get the Protestants into the Church, tried to have a theology that would be more acceptable to them. We recognize the Pope as the authority. We have the same sacraments as Catholics always have, and we have the same faith. So if we are not Catholic, neither were our ancestors until Vatican II. The fourth mark, or the fourth element of becoming a Catholic, is a novelty, this idea of communion. I am in communion with the Church. The Protestants are in partial communion. What do we mean by this communion? Well, it comes from Vatican II, which speaks about the Catholic Church subsisting in the Church of Christ, as if it is a subset of a bigger group. And so there's an ecumenical idea that we are universal independently of the faith, but only because we have this humanity in common. So this idea of communion just means, are you politically correct? Does the Pope like what you do? The participation of the faithful should be different than the people. Padre Pio said, the only one that needs the missal is the priest. The idea is that the Old Testament is not something different than the New Testament, essentially. God chooses who it is that can offer him the worship. The faithful, they can offer the sacrifices, but in their heart. They shouldn't be in the sanctuary reading, because that's an office of the teacher. They shouldn't be like my mother's cousin, a sister of little daughter of St. Francis, up at the altar at the consecration, and sometimes even holding the chalice as if she's part of the work of the priest. So what do we want? We want to have a participation, which is what Padre Pio said, the way to attend Mass is to have the dispositions of Our Lady and St. John the Apostle at the foot of the cross. Our Lady didn't want to be a priest. Women cannot be priests. It's only those that God chooses, not who we would vote for. If you want to keep your faith, keep the traditions of your fathers. Do not move the markers of your fathers. What has produced the saints in the Old Testament, was tradition. What has produced the saints of the New Testament is tradition. We've never had such a self-destruction of loss of vocations, loss of faith, as since these changes were introduced. If you look at the Gallup polls, according in America, about do you believe in hell, do you believe that abortion is wrong, birth control, 90% of the Catholics don't believe the Catholic teachings of the Church. So how many Catholics are truly Catholic today? That's why you need a liturgy that expresses, not ambiguity, but clearly expresses the faith. To practice the faith, you will keep the faith.